So there's been a number of instances recently of people who work at various news organizations who are staffers who have kind of revolted and come out and said, look, what we're doing is untenable vis-a-vis Israel and Gaza. It's unacceptable. There's a massive pro-Israel bias in the media. There just is. And so I think we saw this with, what was it, the New York Times? There was a sort of a staff revolt. I mean, we've seen revolts even amongst the intelligence agencies in the U.S., even amongst now, the other day, it happened with U.S. soldiers were revolting and saying what's happening is just not acceptable. So then we saw Fareed Zakaria, one of the top CNN hosts, who, by the way, Biden listens to and likes, he came out and did a scathing segment where he calls Biden's position on Israel hapless, ineffective, and immoral. Basically calling him a cuck to Netanyahu. So, but now the dissatisfaction is growing and more people are coming out. So look at this. The Intercept reported, credit to Daniel Boguslaw and Prem Thacker, forgive me if I mispronounce that. In internal meeting, Christiane Amanpour confronts CNN brass about double standards on Israel coverage. Amanpour expressed real distress over Israel stories being changed, while other staffers described a climate that is hostile to Arab journalists. Now, remember, guys, it was just uncovered recently by The Intercept, and Crystal did a phenomenal monologue on this as well, showing how the New York Times hired somebody who wasn't a journalist, Nat Schwartz, I believe her name was, who wasn't a journalist, never did any journalism. They hired her to try to basically prove the narrative of mass systemic rape on October 7th from Hamas. And they apparently went all over the country, all the rape crisis centers, all the hospitals, searching for evidence far and wide. Couldn't find any. But then they built the narrative anyway. And in fact, one of the people they cited in the piece, their family came out and said, what you said isn't true. We didn't say these things. You're portraying this in a way that's not how we portrayed it to you. So they built this narrative and ran with it at 1,000 miles an hour. And then come to find out, these people have ties to Israeli intelligence, and so this is like manufacturing consent, but it's actually even worse than that. It is creating narratives out of whole cloth and doing propaganda to push the idea of mass systemic rape, which then the whole point of that was to justify in turn more revenge, more retaliation, more retribution, and it helped lead to the collective punishment against Palestinians, to be able to build an narrative. Hamas is so vicious and so brutal. They're doing systemic rapes. They're total monsters that it's well, we have to lash out. We have to respond. And then that helped lead to, you guys know, the total siege of 2.3 million people, no food, no fuel, no water, destroying all of North Gaza, killing nearly 40,000 Palestinians at this point, 15,000 children. So, and the New York Times was part of the propaganda effort, which brought us to that point. Absolutely pathetic. Now, The Intercept also had, you guys remember this, there was a great piece, an empirical analysis of the language that's used when it's Israeli victims versus Palestinian victims. When it's Israeli victims, it's a slaughter, it's an atrocity, it's a massacre, it's terrorism. When it's a Palestinian victim, they almost never use those words. It's always passive voice. They even go as far sometimes to say, a blast killed Palestinians. A blast. Well, I guess the blast better not do that anymore. No, it's the IDF attacked, right? But they don't talk about it like that. So this Christiane Amanpour, veteran journalist, she knows this. She sees this. She's uncomfortable with it. So we get this news about how she hates CNN's Israel coverage, thinks it's massively biased, because it is. And she comes out and does this segment, which is sort of the opposite and really exposes the reality of what's happening on the ground.
I'm Christiane Amanpour in London. The impact of the war in Gaza is ratcheting up on Israel, on the United States, and on the people of Gaza themselves. More than 30,000 are now dead, close to half of them children. The unthinkable toll of Israel's offensive there since the October 7th attack by Hamas. In an astonishing conversation this week, UNRWA's chief Philippe Lazzarini told me the looming famine in Gaza is now so bad that some people have been eating animal feed to survive, and even that now is running out.
We hear more and more situations where there is not even enough animal food for human consumption for the people there.
Wait. Let me just stop you. What did you say? Animal food for human consumption? That's what they're relying on? There's not even enough of that?
There is not even enough of animal fodder for people to eat or to do bread with animal fodder.
And at the end of the week, this crisis was evident when more than 100 people were killed under Israeli fire and then trampled in the chaos after trying to reach food distribution trucks. That situation is just what the head of the Norwegian Refugee Council, Jan Egeland, had warned me about.
She's had enough. Guys, I'm telling you, something's changing. We even saw it with MSNBC. Alex Wagner, Bernie Sanders, breaking with Biden completely on the issue. I haven't seen this much dissent on an issue. Maybe ever. I mean, MSNBC and CNN are supposed to be the Democratic Party defense networks, right? Definitely MSNBC, CNN to a slightly less degree, but still to some extent, right? They've had enough. They've had enough. They see it. They have eyes. They have ears. You know, they've seen all the facts coming out of there that are absolutely mortifying. The only thing that hasn't changed is U.S. policy. The only thing that matters, too, by the way. The only thing that matters is actual policy. The biggest change we've seen is what? The U.S. saying, we're going to go around our ally and client state and colonial outposts. We're going to go around them and airdrop some food. How are you giving them money and weapons and facilitating the genocide? And then at the same time saying, we'll drop some fucking Skittles on your head too. What? As Fareed Zakaria said about that, it's ineffective, hapless, weak, and immoral. They're all turning. But Joe Biden is a fucking brick wall of wrongness. He's a brick wall of wrongness. They even had Kamala come out after the uncommitted vote in Michigan surpassed 100,000. They even had Kamala come out and say, we need an immediate ceasefire, pause, for at least 6 weeks. So they're trying PR ass covering here and there, right? Let's drop 0.5% of the aid that's actually needed from the air. The media is now almost unanimous. Print has actually started to be even worse, right? New York Times, Washington Post, etc. They're the most passive voice. But with some breaks in CNN, some breaks in MSNBC, everything is changing except U.S. policy. How much more of this can we take, bro? How much more of this can we take? Now there's unanimous agreement. When you have CNN and MSNBC talking about kids starving to death, eating bird seed, and then running out of that, we talked about drinking seawater. This was like 3 weeks into it. People were drinking seawater to survive. Israel banned water purification tablets from going to Gaza. They blocked 70% of the humanitarian aid. Nothing has ever been more clear. This is a textbook case of an ethnic cleansing and genocide. And everybody's onto it. But Joe Biden still stands in the way. And then some Democratic hacks have the nerve to finger wag and shame the uncommitted voters in Michigan. Could you imagine if all of that energy, all of that shaming energy was directed at Joe Biden to change Gaza policy? Could you imagine? All right, there you have it. Even CNN hosts, even MSNBC hosts, veteran journalists, they've had enough. And that's very, very clear. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.